listening to Let's Stay Together Anime Break, the sub-series of Let's Stay Together where we talk about the 2019 anime Fruits Basket. I'm Ellen.
And I'm Kayla.
And today we are discussing episode 16, She Said Don't Step on Them, was the title. We're going to do our summary, spoiler-free discussion and spoiler-y discussion, as we do every time.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting diversion from what normally happens because this chapter, or the content this is from the chapter that we just published about, and one that we haven't, or we just released an episode about, and one that we haven't released an episode about yet. So this is the first time that the anime is like a little bit ahead of where we are.
Mm-hmm.
You think that we had like a couple months ahead, but no. Turns out they're skipping all around. So this episode has it has all of chapter 39, which we just talked about, and then a little bit of chapter 40. So not all of it, but some of it. And then next week we're going to do 40 and 41, so this will all tie in together, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think, what chapter was it that last episode covered? Chapters.
Oh, I
was the lake house, but I can't remember the numbers.
I have a note here, right here, that says it covered chapters 25 and 26.
Yeah, this is a big jump.
It's a pretty big jump. 13 chapters? That's like a whole
Mm-hmm.
volume worth of jump, almost, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like 6 a thing, so yeah, but regardless, it's nice that we get to have some Uo backstory, and I think that this content wasn't... Wait, was this covered in the original anime? I forgot to check before we started recording.
I don't think we got Uo backstory.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally not. It's not covered at all. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Brand new animation.
Yeah, I'm excited. Or I was really excited when we heard the name of the episode and knew what it was about because we just read it, and if we hadn't read it then I wouldn't have known what it was about. And then watched it and I was like, this is gonna be great. It's all brand new stuff. So it was really exciting. So let's just get straight into it.
I wonder if they jumped ahead because they got bored and they're like, let's get some new stuff.
Yeah, I'm tired of this stuff that we've already seen before. Jason. So 1980s, they said.
Who cares about Jason anymore?
Who cares about a bear in a horror movie? This episode opens on a city at night, and we hear the distinct rattle and rumble of a passing train, and the hushed city sound is broken by footsteps trudging up the stairs to an apartment in a tall complex. A young blonde girl with a long jacket arrives and hesitates at the door. She eventually reaches out and twists open the knob and unlocks the door handle with a creak. The only sound coming from inside the apartment is the unmistakable sound of really dumb shit late-night TV. And the girl closes the door with a slam, steps around piles of garbage that are sitting at the door. She pauses as she passes a man who sits in the dark and stares at the TV. Mouth open, empty bottles beside him on the table. She enters another darkened bedroom and closes the door, and leans back against it and slides down to the floor and looks down. And then we cut to the opening credits. This is the film noir version of Furuba.
It's doing that thing the anime seems to like to do, where it kind of starts with a flashbacky thing and then goes or flash forward, and it's sort of a flashback and a flash forward in this case.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but it sort of like jumps ahead in the story and then cut the credits and then goes back to bring it back to where we are.
Yeah, instead of doing like what Takaya does in the anime, I guess as a contrast, where you have like the thing that's at the end is pulled in at the beginning and like bookends the chapter. They tend to pull something from the middle and then build up to it and then go past it, kind of narratively speaking. So that was exactly what happened. And I felt like this episode, speaking of that, this episode seemed like it was really specifically like crafted, kind of like movie style. It had this like really strong, I feel like, narrative composition, where sometimes they don't. Like the one last time, the lake house one that we just talked about, was kind of like, and then this thing happened, then Yame showed up, and now this thing's happening. And that's kind of like how it is in the manga. Like it kind of follows the manga. And then in this case, there was a couple little things were added and a little bit shifted to make, I feel like, give it kind of that stronger build. But anyway, that's fine. So after that, so first of all, it's like a super dark opening, then we cut to the super peppy opening credits, and then we cut into the school pool where Uo is relaxing. In summer, you gotta go to the pool, she says cheerfully. And then there are some girls who are hanging out in the pool and gossiping, asking why the Yankee delinquent is here for swimming class. Don't they usually ditch? It's weird that such an outdated delinquent like her is even part of our class. Right? says Hana, who appears out of the pool suddenly with her long hair flowing out in the water, freakily. The girls freak out and then free stroke / butterfly their way to safety. I was wrong, they think. She's the weirdest one. And the other one says, well, rather than weird, she's scary. So they swim off with their impressive swimming skills.
I don't think the ring was out when Fruits Basket was first out, but that's what the long hair kind of evokes now.
I wonder, I know I mentioned that last time. I feel like I was editing last and I mentioned some mention of Sadako, but I couldn't remember why. Definitely it does evoke that, but maybe that's just like a trope from Japanese horror movies. She might not even be the first one.
It kind of is. It's kind of a classic Japanese ghost look, I think, but
oh yeah, you're right.
It's a very specific thing reference nowadays.
It does, like a girl in the water with long black hair, specifically. Yeah. I feel like back in our 2000 references again, early 2000s references.
I feel like the ring still gets referenced pretty often.
Probably because it was terrifying.
I said there's like one iconic horror movie like every decade, and people just never forget those ones, but they forget all the other ones. I think The Ring was one of those.
Probably. I wonder, but then I feel like it's also so set in a specific time. Like I wonder if people who are a little bit younger than us, people who wouldn't have been old enough to see it, like when it came out or like around that time, wouldn't even have seen it. It's like how people who are younger than us don't know about Napoleon Dynamite. I
think the Ring was more widespread than Napoleon Dynamite. I don't even know about Napoleon Dynamite, and I watched the movie.
What? And you watched it? You just blocked it out of your memory. I get it. It's acceptable. Unfortunately for Hana, she can't enjoy the school pool because she lost her hair tie, which is why she was swimming around and looking for it, and why her hair was all over the place. But it's Tohru to the rescue, and Tohru appears in her cutest hairstyle yet, braided loopy pigtails, but also her worst outfit ever, at least according to Arisa, which is her middle school swimsuit. Hana thanks her for the hair tie, and Uo suddenly bursts into tears. And we transition to Tohru kick paddling happily in the pool, which is hilarious to me. It evoked a strong memory of me swimming in the pool with those like floaty kickboards. It's also funny that she's in high school and she's teaching a kickboard. Anyway, the whole thing is amusing. Hana and Uo sit off to the side of the pool, and Hana tells Uo to chill out. Tohru wears her school swimsuit every year, and Uo complains that they can finally wear their own like non-school swimsuits, but Hana is like, is it not cute? Uo says it's not unflattering or embarrassing, but it's a feeling I get seeing Grandpa and Grandma buy convenience store food, she says, imagining the scene as she works in a convenience store. They probably think nothing of it, but I can't stand watching them. It's so sad. And Tohru runs over. Hey, Tohru, no running at the pool. Don't you know the rules? What the F? Anyway. Tohru runs over as Uo continues, and I start crying for no reason. The tears just start flowing. Yeah, I actually cry while ringing them up, she says, and then we see a flashback again of her working, checking people out of the convenience store, checking a bento out of the convenience store while tears stream down her face. And in the present, Uo is kind of like hunched over on the stairs, crying dramatically, pounding the cement, and all the other kids stare. Arisa, you really do cry easily, Hana says. Tohru looks on at them and thinks that bathing suits are expensive, and she was just trying to be frugal because this one still fits, but maybe this year she should buy a new one. She can't keep making Uo sad after all. I have a great idea, Uo says, and we transition to Shigure's living room. In Shigure's living room, Uo announces, we're about to shop for Toru's new swimsuit. I decided it'll be a present from all of us. And then we see Tohru drawn as a princess, and Chibi, Uo, Hana, Yuki, Kyo, and Shigure gifting her a pink bathing suit with little ruffles. You better be in, she says. Huh? What? Why are you deciding things for us? Kyo demands to know. And why us swim? And Uo's like, quit blushing. Don't you make Tohru do all the housework? Show her some gratitude once in a while. A swimsuit? Nice. I like the sound of it. I love summer, Shigure says. And what he says is Natsu, Banzai, which I thought was really funny. In the Japanese one, at least. See, the writer's all in, Uo says, and Kyo's like, ignore the pervert. Yuki chimes in and says that he's fine with buying a present, but why a swimsuit? Hana explains that it's because she still wears her middle school swimsuit, and Shigure spits out his tea in shock, and Kyo and Yuki sass him for being gross, of course. Tohru comes downstairs then and joins them, and Shigure jumps up and grabs her shoulders and shakes her as he says, seriously, Tohru-kun, please buy one. Please go and buy a proper one. You will, won't you? I'm begging you. I can't bear it if you don't. He's weak when it comes to Tohru-kun, too, Hana says. Uo agrees. So we cut to a bathing suit shop, It turns out that there are a lot of bathing suits and Tohru doesn't know what to choose, so Uo consults the subject matter experts she has brought with her. Hey, you two, she calls to Yuki and Kyo, who sit awkwardly facing away on a bench. Do you like bikinis or one-piece swimsuits better? Don't ask us, they think, sweating nervously. Hey, come and help, Uo says, sauntering over to them, past all the women in the store, giving the boys, like, side-eye glances. And Kyo complains about being there, and Uo is like, what? Then why'd you come along? You forcefully dragged us here, he complains. Why be embarrassed if your thoughts are pure? Uo asks, as Hana holds up a white bikini to Tohru in the background, and Kyo blushes even more and looks away. It's not like I'm asking your underwear preference, she says. You should feel a little more embarrassed, he says. Fine then, a color? You can at least think of a color that looks good on Tohru, she says, and Yuki and Kyo look thoughtful. Blue? Orange? They say, at the same time, and then fight about it, of course. Kyo for orange and Yuki for blue, as expected. Uo looks back and forth between them as they argue and thinks, these two are like an open book. How do they not realize? Are they stupid? Hana cuts in and says, P-I-N-K would be best. And to try again after they've studied more. Yeah, pink is best for Tohru, Uo adds. Don't ask us if you already decided, Kyo shouts, and then Uo says that Kyoko-san did say that pink fit Tohru best. She would say that she was red because she was the red butterfly, and Toru's dad was a straightforward man, so white. Mix those together and you get pink for Tohru. A pink swimsuit? Yep, that'll definitely be cute. Yuki says, it seems like you and Hanajima-san really love Honda-san. Yeah, I mentioned before that Tohru saved me, and thanks to her, I'm a happy, respectable civilian, Uo says. And then Kyo and Uo argue about her being respectable. And we see, off to the side of the room, 3 teen girls appear. One wearing a long coat, one wearing like they all have long skirts, and one has like her little neckerchief undone on her school uniform. That's her, right? Uotani, one says. Yeah, she left the gang, but now look how much she stands out, another says. Want to rough her up? But then they decide not to do anything, except take pics, because she has hot guys with her, it turns out. So focusing back on the main gang, not the 3 kids, they've given Tohru her new bathing suit, and Tohru, of course, is awkward and says that she doesn't deserve it, but then they reassure her. Thank you for everything you do, Hana says. Come on, just take it, Kyo says. Yes, Hana adds. It represents our feelings of gratitude. Please accept it, Honda-san. Which I just thought was cute because it kind of has like their attitude. like how Kyo is like, come on, just take it. Tears well in Toru's eyes and she blushes. She holds the bag tight and says, thank you very much, I'll treasure it. Hana and Uo say, Toru-kun, and squeeze her tight, while Toru's voice actor makes the cutest noise I've ever heard in my life, which I could try to imitate. It was like, oh, yo, 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 yo. It's so funny. Laura Bailey did a good job and wasn't quite as cute. Just throwing it out there. So we transitioned. We're bouncing all over the place. First we're at school, then we're at Shigure's, and now we're going to a soba restaurant. No, sorry, then we were at the bathing suit shop. Now we're going to a soba restaurant.
I thought you said a sober restaurant for a second.
It's a sober restaurant. No drinking, which is fine because they're youths. They shouldn't be drinking anyway. Youths. Yuki kicks off the conversation by asking another probing question, which is which swimsuit they got. And Uo says they'll find out when she wears it. You'll probably go to the beach, right? Yeah, I hope so, Yuki says. Yuki is all about conversation this episode. He's trying so hard to people, like we said. Or like you said, specifically. Uo says that the 3 ladies should take a trip somewhere too sometime. And Yuki comments that they're very close, and he asks if they met in elementary school, and they explain that they met in middle school. Hana had just transferred to their school in 8th grade. Yes, I caused a minor problem at my previous school, she says, and we cut to Yuki and Kyo in the silently freaked out corner of the room.
She burned down the gym because it's full of vampires. I mean...
that's my only reaction for that joke. Uo-chan, you were still active then, right? Yeah, I joined the gang in 5th grade, Uo says. You always wore a mask, Tohru says. With thinned eyebrows and a long skirt too, Uo says. Oh, Risa, that's still true today, Hana says. And Uo's like, I guess you're right. Ah, ha, 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 ha. And then we pan over Yuki and Kyo during that conversation, who are looking sort of anxious, but not like how they just were when Hana talked about burning the gym down. No, just kidding. They wonder why she's so cheerful as they sweat drop. Uo says that she was way more on edge back then, like an unfed lion, and then we cut to a scene of her in the past, on a white background, like in The Void, like Haru. She's dressed in an all-white, like long pants and a long coat, a long trench coat, and she wears a black surgical mask. Leaves or feathers fall around her. We talked about, I wrote these notes before I edited the last episode. They're feathers that represent transitioning through time, right? A problem child that left my teachers and dad hopeless, her narration continues. I wonder why it's so easy to go bad. And then we cut to a night scene. Uo runs through the frame, carrying a pipe. We see her, gang members behind her, as she swings and strikes with the pipe. In another scene, we see her climbing a jungle gym at a playground, kind of swinging her legs out of the jungle gym and kicking someone off to the side. Before I knew it, I joined a female gang, running with tough women, causing nothing but trouble. I punched people and got punched. You don't even want to know half the things I did. Her narration continues. We see her hitting a guy and then getting punched and knocked down, laying on the ground after the fight. In short, I was a great big idiot, she says. In her memory, she sits up and her narration continues. I was an idiot, but still there was someone I looked up to. And we see a woman standing, long jacket billowing in the night breeze. We zoom in and see that we zoom in on her jacket, which is embroidered prominently with a red butterfly in the back. She pushed aside men and became a gang leader despite being a woman. Her street name was the Crimson Butterfly. It was Kyoko-san, Uo says, and we transition back to the present. Tohru-kun's mother. You could see off in the background the three girls who were commenting about Uo are still creeping by the door of the soba restaurant, and one of them asks the kind of like leader of the group if they're going to do something, and she says to wait, but then she whips out a cell phone to snap another photo of Yuki and Kyo. And they continue to creep on Yuki and Kyo in a cloud of awestruck sparkles while a poor surfer, the host, tries to get their attention. The kids' food arrives, and Yuki asks another question, quite awkwardly, about Toru's mother, and Toru cheerfully explains that her mother was a bike gang leader before having her. Oh, I see, Yuki replies just as awkwardly. It's hard to imagine knowing you, he says. And then Uo chimes in that she wasn't just any old Yankee, They say that whenever she rode her bike, the taillights resembled a fluttering butterfly. She was strong in a fight and chivalrous too. Every time the older members talked about her, my admiration grew. And then we see a flashback of Kyoko riding a motorcycle, weaving down the road, fighting people, and then walking down the street kind of flanked by gang members on either side, some of whom appear taller or maybe older than her. It happens to everybody, right? Uo says. They're your hero, and you put them on a pedestal. And then we see Uo talking to some girls in her gang, kind of when she was younger. You really love the butterfly, huh, Uotani, one says. Oh yeah, I heard she lives near here. Yeah, they say she got married and changed her last name to Honda, and she has a daughter about your age. She might even go to your school. And we cut to Uo's school, and Uo walks down the hallway, and the kids are all like, whoa, Uotani's here. I guess she wasn't making regular appearances at school. Uo imagines what the Crimson Butterfly II would look like. A total Yankee, too. But that image is about to be completely shattered as a girl bumps into Uo from behind, carrying a large stack of notebooks. The girl begins to apologize, but baby Uo sasses her. Watch where you're going, dummy. And the girl apologizes again and then bows, spilling notebooks all out across the floor. There's a silent beat before the girl is like, ah, and freaks out about what to do. The kids start walking all over the notebooks while the girl's like, please don't step on them, kind of daintily from the floor. Uo helps out by yelling, she said don't step on them, dumbos. And then squats down and starts picking up the notebooks and sasses the girl to help. Screw everyone for making me do this crap, Uo winches. You, what's your name? I love that, screw everyone for making me do this crap. That's my motto of the week. What's your name? I'm Tohru Honda, our baby heroine says. Honda, Uo says. I'll kick your butt if you end up claiming to be the Crimson Butterfly's daughter. Oh yes, that was my mom's name when she was still active. Tohru smiles and Uo is shocked. Grit your teeth, baby Uo threatens. And then we transition to them walking home together. Seriously? Uo thinks, looking at Tohru. Please meet my mom, Tohru says, smiling. She'll like that. And Uo wonders if she's actually Kyoko's daughter. And of course she couldn't tell. Baby Tohru is as plain as you can get. May I call you Uotani-san? Tohru asks. Huh? Yeah, Uo replies. It's nice to meet you, Uotani-san, Tohru says. Uo thinks, she seems a little... how should I put it? Strange. Uo's thoughts are interrupted as Kyoko runs up and surprise hugs Tohru from behind and welcomes her home, much to Uo's shock and chagrin. I'm home, Tohru says. You're heavy. And then Kyoko says that she's lucky that they met on their way home and starts to talk about something that happened at work. Tohru says, before that, I want you to meet someone. And the scene unfolds in slow motion for Arisa. Could this person be? She thinks. And we see Kyoko turn and look over her shoulder at her. Oh my, and who is this? Kyoko says, waving Toru's hand at Uo, and Tohru introduces her. The Kyoko-san that I admired so much had become a total doting parent, Uo thinks. In the present at the noodle shop, Uo says, at that moment my admiration for her crumbled to dust. It was a huge disappointment at the time, which was totally unfair of me. I made up this image of her as my hero, and then had the nerve to be disappointed when the real her wasn't what I expected. It's obvious that she'd be different than what I imagined. Selfish, huh? She says, looking rueful. Kyoko-san just smiled. She smiled and forgave my selfishness back then, Uo says, and then we transition back to the past. At Baby Tohru's apartment, Kyoko takes laundry off the line while Tohru cooks dinner, and Arisa sits uncomfortably at the table. Sorry it's such a mess, Kyoko says. Anyway, make yourself comfortable. The red butterfly is bringing the laundry, Uo thinks. Say, Uo-chan, why don't you join us for dinner? Uo-chan, she grumps. It's Uotani, right? So Uo-chan, Kyoko says, and Uo's mouth gapes, clearly not sure what to say. Tohru runs over happily, clasping a ladle, and says, please join us for dinner, Uo-chan, and then Uo laments how the nickname is already sticking. I'm going home, Uo says, and Kyoko's like, come on, Toru's a great cook, and pats her on the head, and Tohru blushes and brushes off the compliment, of course, and they talk about what's for dinner, but Uo can't take it anymore and tries to peace out. Oh, are your parents strict? Kyoko asks. You can tell from looking at me that I don't have strict parents, Uo says. Kyoko is like, that's not necessarily true. Everyone's circumstances are different. And Uo scrunches up her face and then turns to Kyoko and Tohru and shouts, I'm just completely disappointed that the Crimson Butterfly turned out to be such a domestic doting parent. I can't believe you've sunken this low. Kyoko simply smiles, which shocks Uo. I just relaxed a bit, that's all, Kyoko says. Then Uo huffs and leaves, and Tohru worries after her. Kyoko notices that Uo's forgotten her mask on the table. And so, outside, as Uo walks away, Tohru chases after her to return it. Uo-chan, you left this, she calls, and as she approaches, Uo grabs Toru's shirt and pulls her up close to her. Don't nickname me like you're my friend, she yells, and then pushes Tohru away. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Run home and let mommy spoil you. And Uo kind of saunters off. So stupid. Your family makes me want to puke. Uo's senpai from the gang rounds the corner and sees her leaving, and Kyoko watches from the balcony, and that senpai sees Kyoko as well. So she sees kind of like everything that happened. Uo walks down the road, her hands in her pockets. What the heck, she thinks. And then we see Tohru behind her, clutching the mask. They get on my nerves. But I also feel like I'm being left behind. I don't know why I'm so pissed. And she imagines Kyoko and Tohru smiling, Kyoko complimenting Tohru's cooking, and Uo grimaces. Maybe it's because that atmosphere doesn't fit me. Something there felt uncomfortable. She remembers the laundry hanging, and then we transition to a playground at night. So it's all like bright, the laundry's all out in the sun. Then we transition to night, this like grungy playground. Uo sits slumped on the ground, and the gang's senpai from earlier asks her if she met the butterfly's daughter. Uo says, I don't care anymore. It's a pain to go to school anyway. It's not worth going, another girl chimes in. Got that right, they say, and then they laugh. We see Uo riding on the back of a motorcycle, the rest of her gang ahead of her, and she looks back over her shoulder. The atmosphere that I fit into, she thinks, is this one. She and two other girls threaten a woman on the street. We see a scene of the brawl from earlier, and we see the girls gathered near a bonfire. My mom called the cops on me, one complains. I swear I'm going to kill her someday. Another one says, my old man told me never to come back. It's like, you're the stupid losers who gave birth to us. You can see Uo on the side, not appearing to be joining in the complaints, and she looks kind of lost in her thoughts and she closes her eyes. My kind of place is one where I can fall to rock bottom, she thinks. Then we fade to black, and then in on a streetlight. Nowhere else to go today, Uo says, so I guess I'll go home for once. The girl suggests that she smother her dad in his sleep. They're like, oh, your dad is, it's just your dad at home, right? You should smother him in his sleep. And then suggest that she get cash from him. And they cackle as she walks off into the darkness. We see the same apartment building from earlier, and then we cut to a scene of a woman walking away. Uo explains that her mom left with another guy when she was in first grade, and we see Uo's dad and baby Uo, not just baby Uo, but even smaller Uo, left behind in the foreground. I've been living with my dad ever since, she says, and then we see the same scene from earlier. Uo arrives home, no greeting at all from her father, who's watching TV in the dark. All he does is drink. I'm used to it, though, she thinks. She goes into her room and slumps to the floor. You get used to it whether you like it or not. We see her eyes kind of glistening in the darkening room, and she imagines Tohru smiling, softly, Kyoko, the two of them together, and then Tohru trying to return her mask, and the laundry again. She remembers Kyoko saying, I just relaxed a bit, that's all. We cut back to Uo resting against the door, and there's a cacophony of this, like, altered sound, which we don't normally hear in this show. It's like the sound of the kind of, like, late-night TV that's on, but it's kind of, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's distorted. Uo covers her ears and holds her head and grunts, and then we zoom out on her, and then cut to the credits. And then there's also an extra scene at the end where there's the 3 gang girls all trying to sound really tough, and then they end up testing out their tough guy talk on Momiji, who talks back at them in German and scares them off. Which was quite the scene that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
In my notes, I called it a shawarma scene.
I just saw that.
There's a hilarious shawarma scene. I don't know if there's like an official word for it, but that's what I call it.
It's just called an end credits or a post credits scene.
No, shawarma scene. You know what I meant. Also, I translated what Momiji said, and in Google Translate, it's just like, what do you think? Are you trying to fight? We're getting hamburger. Do you want to get hamburgers? Do you want to come along? They're very tasty. And then they like run off. I forget exactly what the girl says, but she's also like, she says something to them in Japanese, and then she's like, let's fight, which is really funny. And then they freak out. When they freak out, she says, I'll be back, and then they run off, which is really great. Like Terminator reference. I wonder if people get that too. If you don't get Jason, do you get Terminator? I don't know. Although Terminator is constantly on cable, so.
Yeah. So we're saying it's our first like fully new episode, which is exciting. I believe it's also our first 2-parter since the beginning.
Yeah, you're right. Usually they're just one-offs.
Yeah. And I think it's our first post-credits scene.
That's true.
Lots of firsts.
Unless you count editing in the the rotund seahorse or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like when they change, it's not the first time, it's the first time there's a post-credit scene, but I guess they changed the credits before, which is not really the same, but yeah, it is. I thought that was an interesting choice. Just like, I guess it's just for comedy. They're like, this series is starting to get serious. Now we need to add some like comedy in here.
It's interesting.
We got to build out these characters. I don't feel sympathetic enough for them. And empathetic enough for them.
Yeah. I feel like we got more like scenes of gang life than we do in the equivalent chapters. Like there were just like a couple like panels with like flashes of gang stuff or whatever. But we see like fight scenes and riding on motorcycles and for both Uo and Kyoko. Yeah.
Yes. I remember, so we talked about this, and by I remember, I mean, like, we talked about it, this episode that most recently came out, right? So we talked a lot about Kyoko, because a lot of the stuff in the chapter that we read was, like, her kind of gang-like life. It was stuff that Uo talked about her.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing is that I felt like we got more scenes of Uo's gang time.
Yeah.
Which there wasn't really space for in that chapter that we covered, I think, already.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more that came from that chapter, stuff that's later in the episode, but...
Yeah. One I thought was kind of striking was her riding on the back of the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I remember seeing, like, when the girls were just, like, hanging out and one of them was, like, leaning on the motorcycle. I was like, does one of them actually drive that? And I was like, oh, I guess the rest of them are older than Uo. And then seeing her ride on the back really kind of drove home how young she is.
Mm-hmm. I thought so there's I think they're kind of, I would classify them as, it feels like they're additions at least. There could have been like scenes of her in the gang. There's definitely scenes of her Uo hanging out with like the other girls in the gang, the 2 who act really high and mighty and annoying. There's a couple of scenes of that, but I don't think there's ones of her, and there's probably one of her like throwing a punch, but they're not animated, so they don't stand out as much. And then I felt like the way that they're used, and then the way also this was at the beginning of the episode, the whole scene where she comes home and like walks through the house, that was all added. That was all an addition from later, I guess. So there's a bunch of these scenes that really like kind of characterize what her life was like.
Yeah.
Not just the gang, but also her home life, which was interesting.
Yeah, there's something in that scene, not the beginning one, but the more expanded one, when it came back to it. That I kept rewinding to try and figure out what it was supposed to be. It looked like there's like a plate of like wrapped food or something.
Oh yeah.
And I was like trying to figure out what that was like meant to indicate. Like,
well, I think it's just like he doesn't eat. I'm not sure if I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. Like, I wonder who, or maybe he made a plate for her.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wondering. I was like, did he like set aside food for her? Did she get food for him and he didn't eat it? Or is it just supposed to indicate that they're like not eating food well in the house?
They're definitely not.
But yeah.
We have many times talked about eating meals and stuff together in this show, and it's like, yeah, they don't. it's implied that he drinks, right? Well, it's not implied. I mean, she says it, but like you can see on the table, it's just like covered in empty bottles, and then the food is there, but he hasn't really eaten it, or she hasn't.
Yeah, but yeah, the fact that she like kind of looked at it specifically and it got kind of its own little shot made me kind of wonder about what it's supposed to signify.
I'm not sure. I don't think it was in the. I don't think it was in the chapter.
I don't think so. Maybe it'll come back in the conclusion.
maybe it's in the later part or something, but I think it's just part of characterizing what their shitty relationship is like. Like, it's just another thing that shows that they don't. But then at the same time, like, one scene that I thought was interesting, that which is like, you know, Kyoko is like, oh, are your parents strict? And Uo's like, you can tell my parents aren't strict by looking at me. But it's not necessarily, Kyoko is like, well, that's not necessarily true. So that scene where she comes home is kind of, it's after the girls are like, oh, like, you should smother your dad in his sleep, you should steal money from him, and all this other kind of stuff that they're encouraging her to do. But then yet she comes home, and it's not like he's doing anything nefarious, like he's drinking, but then there's food left out, and the question is, was it from him to her, or from her to him? And if it's from him to her, like if he left it out for her, then it's like, it's not like he doesn't care about her. He just like is clearly dealing with other shit too.
Like, I feel like, I don't know if it's gonna like come around and be explicitly stated, but I feel like it was maybe supposed to indicate like there's some attempt at connecting there that's just not going through on one end or the other.
Plus, we've seen them later. Like, we saw the scene in the anime we know during New Year's.
On good terms in the present day.
Yeah, and Uo's kind of like, you gotta eat and stop drinking or whatever. I feel like what it is that they need each other, and neither of them, you know, if he has, like, I don't know if it's just that it's not the motivation, but they don't seem to be connecting at this point, right? So it's possible. I did think it was interesting, and it could be for either, could have been either one trying to do something for the other. It's an interesting, it's not really clear, and it's ambiguous, and that's what makes it interesting. I liked the way the scene, at least I felt like the way the scene, the one that's repeated, where she comes in, it's like completely silent the first time, like the opening scene, and then when she comes home the second time, it's like narrated. The timing feels kind of funny the first time you watch it, and then when you watch it again and she like does her voice is overlaid on it, it's like perfectly timed. Like, I don't know, it's kind of the spacing, like the all the like things that she's thinking and the actions, like it just adds to it again. I feel like they've done this before in other episodes too, where they'll show the same scene but change something about it. It's kind of like the one that I just thought of is the one with Hattori, where it's like Momiji's telling you what happened, and you see the same scene, and then it's Hattori narrating the same scene. Like, structurally, I think it's a nice like build up of what's happening.
Yeah, I always like this kind of scenes where you see a scene and then you see it from a different perspective, and it like kind of changes the meaning.
And in this case, I think it's just further. I feel like she's like, and the other thing is that this is also, it's again what am I trying to say? It's contrasted with her being like, this is the gang life for me. This is where I fit in. So she goes to Tohru's house. She sees them being all like cheerful and relaxed and whatever, and then you can tell that she's really uncomfortable. She says she's angry, but she's really just uncomfortable and kind of envious of that relationship. And then she tries to go, and she's like, the gang is where I fit in. But then even they're kind of like, she doesn't seem to really fit in with them either. Like, she doesn't seem happy there. Like, the two other girls are like, I don't know how to describe it. Every time they have a conversation, they're just like cackling. They're having a great time, and Uo's just kind of sitting off to the side after meeting Kyoko. Like, she doesn't seem into it. And then she goes home and is kind of like not into it there, but still it somehow feels like the better place out of all three of them for some reason. Like she's upset about it. I can't remember what I was originally going to say. Sorry, it kind of trailed off. I lost my train of thought. But she goes home and she's like, it's fine, you get used to things being shitty. But it's directly contrasted with her like kind of not fitting into the gang, even though she thinks that that's where she belongs, I guess. Yeah. This episode has a lot of, because it has these like repeated scenes over and over again, and there's dialogue, but there's not, in some scenes there's not a lot of dialogue, or it's just someone's inner monologue kind of. I feel like it's just like Uo by herself or something from her perspective. So you see a lot of like imagery. Like, there are a lot of things that are, it's not like there's scenes of them sitting, like the characters sitting together and eating or whatever, but a lot of it is flashbacks, and so there's just like Uo's perspective of walking down the street, Uo's perspective of like the laundry in the house, or coming to her apartment, or being in the dark, being at the playground. there's like these scenes of that are like really focused on Kyoko and just her experience in the gang. So I thought it was interesting how there's like there's a couple of specific pieces of imagery that are repeated over and over again. One is the laundry. And in fact, there's this really hard transition from the laundry to the jungle gym in like the later half of the from she like thinks back on it's like so she arrives it's 3 times. She arrives at the house, she meets Kyoko and then goes to their house and then Kyoko's taking the laundry off the line and you see the one scene, the one kind of like imagery. When Uo leaves in a huff, then she thinks about the laundry again. It's like one of the last things. Like I said, that's the part that's like that hard transition. It's like she thinks about the laundry and then they're at the dirty like grungy playground at night. Mm-hmm. And then after she goes home and slumps on against the door, she remembers Tohru and Kyoko and the laundry again. So it's this repeated symbol, which I thought was an interesting choice. Like I guess it's supposed to symbolize something. It's supposed to be related to some idea. Mm-hmm. It's this like clean laundry that's contrasted with this like grungy.
I think it's just like a very homey, domestic kind of thing. Because like even when like she first said, she's like horrified that the red butterfly is taking down the laundry. So...
yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah,
it's this. Yeah, I think you're right. It's just like a symbol of kind of like domestic life. The thing that she thinks that she's like rebelling against, but really where she probably fits in best, right? Yeah, what she wants. It's what she wants. She thinks that she doesn't need it, but what she wants is the same relationship that Tohru and Kyoko have.
Yeah.
I also thought there was a couple scenes where they're at the playground, and the playground is all like it's dark and it's all like graffitied and like grungy and stuff. I thought it was also kind of it's probably like a symbol of just, you know, the loss of innocence of her childhood. I mean, she's like in 5th grade or whatever, right? Or 6th grade or
she's
something.
She's young enough to still be playing on the playground.
Totally.
I was definitely still playing on the playground when I was in 5th grade.
Totally. Okay, so last time when we talked about this chapter, we also talked about Kyoko. So I feel like we talked a lot about Uo. We talked about some of these like symbols that kind of were used to communicate some things about her life in this episode. And then we also talked about Kyoko. And last time you pointed out, what I thought was, I just want to point it out again if people weren't listening, this is the first time that she appeared in a non kind of just like Tohru's memory or like advice kind of way. Like this is the first time we have someone else's perspective on Kyoko.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. And that's actually, it's kind of like what the whole episode centers on is like Uo's perspective and it being like completely shattered and like having this idea that this person is who she isn't, which I think is interesting. I feel like I relate to as an adult.
Yeah, and I think it's really the first time Kyoko kind of appears as like a person,
not just like a guru. I mean, yeah, she has this behavior, like the things. It's not like just like self-help. You know, Kyoko. It's like she's a real person, and she shows up, and she has like this personality. It's a little bit different than what we see, I think, from Tohru's perspective. Tohru has this idealized version of her, and Kyoko is like. Not Kyoko.
She's kind of a goober.
A guru.
A goober.
A goober.
Goober.
Oh. Yeah, she's the number one goober.
Yes.
Yeah, she like slumps on Tohru and she's like, "Hey, guess what happened today?" Like, and the other interesting thing is she doesn't notice Uo at all, which is really funny. Yeah. Like, and Tohru's like, "Oh, I want you to meet this person." It's like you saw Tohru, but you didn't see the other girl standing right next to her. It's funny and it's cute. But yeah, it's interesting to just see another perspective of her that's not so idealized and not from, you know, Tohru's perspective.
Yeah. And she still comes off as like a pretty, you know, like wise and admirable person, but just in kind of a different way than she's been portrayed before.
She's been betrayed. Yeah, definitely in a way that she's been portrayed before.
Yeah, like in this, she comes off more as like wise because she's been there, done that, you know. T-shirt kind of thing.
Like I was a leader of a biker gang and all I got was this stupid t-shirt.
Yes.
Yeah, she's like and she even she like does her like wisdom drop even in this conversation. It's just not done in the same way. Like she's like everybody's situation is different. That's a takeaway. Takeaway number 1. Everyone's situation is different. Takeaway number 2, like you know, like you don't have to she's like I just relaxed a bit. Like things don't always have to stay the same. You don't have to be so angry. So like we did technically get these like pieces of just kind of like knowledge from her, from someone who has that kind of life experience, but just not the way Tohru does.
Just without the you know flashback echo and shoujo bubbles.
That's what I mean. She's like a guru. Like Tohru has her up on this kind of pedestal. It's not like just a regular person in Tohru's memory, which totally makes sense. But
I mean, she's like barely a year away from the death at
yeah,
this
exactly.
point, so.
For someone who was so important to her, and I think she's just kind of clinging on to those things that probably helped her, that helped Tohru be a better person, or it helps her deal with all the problems that she has to deal with now that she doesn't have that person. Like, I feel like you're a good, like, a parent or a good mom or a good role model in the case of like Uo is someone who, you know, you can kind of like bounce ideas off of or bounce problems off of, and they have things that they can tell you to help you work through those things yourself. And now Tohru doesn't have that person live, so she's just relying on the things that she said before, like trying to cling to something to maintain that or to keep growing, right? Yeah. And in this case for Uo, I think it's about to be exactly the same situation, but right now she's just like at this point in the story we're leaving her like her you know, her perspective of Kyoko, of her role model or her hero, is completely shattered. And her kind of sense of purpose is faltering. The place where she belongs is she's not, it's not clear. Like, she's having this kind of like identity crisis, you know, in 6th grade or whatever.
Yeah. 6th grade was rough, I'll give her that.
I mean, it's true. It's rough for everybody, I think, but especially for her.
Yeah. One thing I like kind of just thought of, I mean, it's obvious, I just never really put words to it, is that like she started off like idolizing Kyoko for one thing and winds up idolizing her for another thing. It's like she's still her hero, like at the beginning and the end of the story, just has that little middle part.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the subversion of what she thought.
Yeah.
And you could, I mean, and it's yeah, I mean, Kyoko is like, you know, when she says I just relaxed a bit, it's like she's still the same person. Like, that's kind of what's implied by that statement, right? But, you know, Uo just thinks that, I feel like young people, like kids, they have a we talked about this before. Why did we talk about this? I can't remember which episode we talked about, but like we talked about how kids, I made I made a reference to Inside Out. Like, kids kind of have this like one perspective of things. Like, people have to be one certain way. They can't be like multiple things. Like, she can't be a mom and a gang leader, right? Like, she has to be, in Uo's mind, Kyoko has to be like a badass. She has to be this specific type of person, and then for someone like us to look back on it and say like, well, she is that person. She's just doesn't act the same way anymore. Like, yeah. So it's just part of her developing that perspective.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll see what happens next time. We're left in a cliffhanger.
Yeah. She's getting her multicolored core memories.
Thank you for continuing my my reference, but I do feel like it's true, especially in this case. Like, it's so clearly demonstrated the way that Uo thinks that Kyoko has to be this one way, and she even imagines like Tohru as being. We talked about it said like it was labeled like the red butterfly the second or something, which I thought was really funny, and we joked about it when we talked about this last time in the last episode, that she has this idea of even who Tohru is, you know, based on what she thinks the red butterfly should be like.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of comments about not just Uo, but also the beginning part of this episode with Kyo and Yuki again. So I might have brought it up when we talked about this last time or in an earlier episode, but I feel like we're hitting on the theme of like standing out again. And it kind of, in terms of like Kyo and Yuki, they don't want to stand out too much being like in the swimsuit store. And I think that it maybe has to do, for them, I feel like they're kind of indoctrinated by the family to be so secretive about everything. But there's multiple things that kind of like hit on this theme again. So like the girls being like, the kids are really sassy about her in the pool. They're like, oh, why is she here? Shouldn't she be skipping? Like, she really stands out. There's one of the like little subtitles. We often talk about how subtitles change a little bit, or like maybe the interpretation changes a little bit of what someone says, some dialogue. And the three kind of like Yankee girls who were there before, they said like, I think in the Tokyo Pop, when we read this in the chapter, they said like, oh, she left the gang and now she thinks she's so great or whatever. But the way the subtitles read this time was like, yeah, she left the gang, but now look how much she stands out. So it was like just a little slightly different, that also kind of like touched on the same idea. she talks about how Uo in her memory as a younger kid talks about how Tohru is kind of weird and different. I feel like we're starting to get all these. I remember before when we talked about way earlier on in an episode, if we were talking about the onigiri game and talking about Toru's memories of the hat, and how I was always under the impression when I read this through before that Tohru was somebody that she's really clearly very kind, but to me I was always kind of like, I never really thought about how the other kind of kids in the class treated her, but it seems like she's also somehow kind of like ostracized. Like she's not super popular. She just has Uo and Hana as friends. Like it doesn't seem, at least as far as we can tell, and she was picked on as a kid by the other kids. So it seems like there's something about her that like kids aren't super friendly to her, right? When she was little. So it seems like she was also like bullied, or she stands out too. Mm-hmm. She's sort of treated like she's ostracized a little bit, I think, actually. I think there's evidence of that. It's so very subtly woven in, but
yeah. Even Uo says like she's kind of weird in this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, you're the one who's like walking into school with a mask and like saying that Toru's a little weird too. So, Kyo, we talked about this also a lot, where Kyo he will never sit at a table with anybody. He never like faces them. Like this time he's like facing away from them when he sits to eat with them at lunch. At least initially, like he also is always uncomfortable being in these like social group situations, sitting at the table at Shigure's, or even like with Tohru and friends, right? So those are all the things that I have to say that are not spoilery about this episode. Okay, so we'll do our spoilery discussion, I guess, after this. I will play music. Next time we're going to talk about the episode 17, which is called "This is for Uo-chan." So another great. I mean, we know it's got to be about Uo.
Yeah, it sounds more dramatic than it is.
This is for Uo-chan.
Yeah.
Or is it like, this is for Uo-chan? Or is it like, this is for Uo-chan? How about that? I can go all night. Okay. Thank you all, as always, for listening. You can connect with us on Tumblr and Twitter. Or you can email us or on our website. Hope you're all enjoying listening to this podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Spoilers. We're back to talk about spoilers. In terms of like, there's some spoilers that are things that we can talk about that are going to happen directly next time. So we briefly talked about the Uo senpai who was there, who saw the exchange with her and Tohru and Kyoko.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're like building her up more, which I think is good, because I know like when I first read the chapters, when like they're like, "Oh, your senpai from before," I was like, "Who?"
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, yeah, Kyoko's like, "Oh yeah, your senpai came, the girl with like short hair," and there's like a little cutaway to her, and you're like, "Oh, that one person from that one panel."
Yeah, she said like one line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess they're just
establishing her more.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice that she's just there, and then she is that she's there in the background. Then she sees her exchange with Tohru. Then she asks about the red butterfly. So she was there 3 times also, which is nice.
Yeah, and it also is like a slightly less contrived way for her to know where Kyoko lives. Because I know in the manga it was something like, "Oh, I found your address written down in Uo's bag," or something.
Did she really?
Yeah, I was like, that's convenient.
Oh.
Yeah, it said like, "A senpai of yours came to our house. She saw the address in your notebook."
It's like, what? Uo's not doing homework. Like, why is she? Yeah, why does she have access to Uo's notebook?
So it's a good question. Did she like pause to like rifle through Uo's notebook before running to get help while she's actively getting beat up?
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, hang on a second. I know what to do.
Yeah,
I'll dig around in the
she
notebook."
Wrote down a helpful address
here.
Yeah,
the address of a former gang leader.
Yeah, and hopefully she labeled it like Kyoko Honda,
the red butterfly.
The former red butterfly.
The red butterfly's address, it says underlined, there's like a heart around it.
Yeah. She wrote like Mrs. Uotani, Red Butterfly.
Mrs. Arisa Butterfly. I was gonna call this, I forgot to make a joke about it, but I was gonna say when Tohru runs into her in the hallway, I was like, it's their meet cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I really like Kyoko. I like her voice actress. I like the way that she kind of, the things that she does with her voice that make her, it kind of like adds to her being this like doting parent type figure. It's gonna be cool when she comes back and saves Uo from the gang by like kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's something else I forgot. That I didn't look up the voice actors, but I assume they were the same. But both voice actors, English and Japanese, doing young Uo, did like a really good job making her sound like this like younger, scrappy teenager kind of character. Like,
yes, I think it is the same actress.
Yeah, I assume it is. It would be weird to get a new one to play someone who's like 3 years younger, but
yeah,
they definitely did put some effort into making her sound younger and like harsher, kind of.
That's true. Like those kids at the end.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the dub, but I wonder what they said in the dub. It's got to be funny.
Yeah, it's the same kind of gist. I don't remember the exact words, but
they're like, "You want to fight, punk?" Just trying to think of anything else. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of spoilers because like we're just going to talk about it next time.
Yeah, it's a fairly kind of self-contained story with just like, it's like, here's Uo's backstory.
I think like the spoilers are really about Kyoko. Actually, I think like because there's a bit of backstory about her and the gang and like stuff that Uo knows, but then we get to see her story later as well.
Yeah. And I mean, like the stuff we mentioned in the manga chapter where like, you know, Tohru and Uo's meet cute is kind of foreshadows Uo and Kureno's meet cute.
Correct. Their actual meet cute, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only spoilers that I had from last time were the things we just talked about, which is like we learned a bit about Kyoko's gang life, and which is something we talked about before, and then we also talked about people having found families. So, you know, I don't know. The gang is clearly a found family for her. She acts like Uo thinks that it is, but it ain't.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think like I felt like the way the this episode was structured is that it really clearly sets up like how conflicted she is at that point in the story. Where she goes and like how she's like angry and doesn't understand why and stuff like that, you know, like a kid, which is interesting. And the other spoiler that I had from last time was that we see obviously the next two, so probably the next full episode of the anime is going to complete this arc because they kind of covered like 1.5. We talked about how the reason we read this as a one chapter is because the next two kind of complete this arc. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how they kind of covered like 1.5 of the chapters. So maybe they'll cover the next 1.5 in the next one.
Yeah, probably.
It's funny how like half the episode is them shopping for bathing suits, and it's like I don't have anything to say about that. Sorry, it's like I don't care. Don't care what Toru's bathing suit looks like.
Yeah, it's funny because that beginning is like really kind of standard for like the series until now, and then like when it transitioned to her backstory, it gets kind of artsy. Like,
yeah, it's like a that's like I said. It's kind of like it reminds me of like kind of it's a little more cinematic.
Yeah,
like it has sometimes things are just like laid out like. I feel like I didn't do a good job explaining what I meant in the beginning, or maybe I was like too wordy about it, but like it's normally you have this like here's the thing that happens, now some people show up, and then there's like a conflict, like Yukin fight or whatever, and then something gets resolved, or Toru's does something awkward and then it gets resolved and it's the end of the episode. Like that's kind of the formula that we've seen for most of them. But in this case it's like there's an inciting incident where they decide to go do this thing, and then what happens is that it launches into this very like cinematic backstory.
Yeah.
So, and I always kind of, when I was going through the beginning of this, I sort of like forgot the beginning part of the story. Where it's like, there's like they go shopping for a bathing suit, but really the interesting part is like all the things that are sort of the beginning part that's setting it up, and then after after Uo starts talking about her backstory, and then kind of like the resolution of that, which we're about to get.
Yeah. Was it
hitting rock bottom.
Yeah. I feel like, does this change the timeline at all, moving this episode up? Because don't they say it's summer in both the chapter and the episode?
Shh. What season was it before? It was still spring. I think all the all the Kyo stuff happens in the summer. The lake house is Golden Week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's spring. It's like May. Golden Week, I think, is May. So it could technically be like the early summer. Yeah. It's like they slotted this in as early as possible.
Yeah, wasn't that last episode was the lake house?
Yeah, exactly. Last episode was the lake house.
So it went from spring to summer.
It went from
really
May.
Quickly.
Well, who knows when they open the pool in Japan? It could be hot. It's way hotter there than here. Yeah. So than
but she does say like, this is summer or something.
Yeah, like... definitely the summer life. Don't question it. Hold on, wait. Let me find my list of episodes because I want to find out which one was immediately after. Oh, Kisa shows up. When Kisa shows up, I think it's summery too because it's like rainy. It's like pouring rain, like a summer kind of rain, right? Mm-hmm. And then Tohru fails her final exams, and then it's Kyo's true form.
Yeah, isn't that like spring stuff though? Because they're talking about the rain. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Something I thought of. It's like that they kept the summer line in. I was like,
Definitely summer, they said. I think it like maybe adjusts it forward like a month. A lot happened. I mean, Kyo's true form is 4 chapters, but it's one night or like 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
The part right after all the Yuki stuff that happens after Kyo's true form. Mm-hmm. Yuki is like, I'm looking forward to spending the summer with you. Hopefully we get to go to the beach and go to a festival, which they won't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think he's just making the summer really long because we're gonna have all this like, we're gonna have the Kyo stuff and the presumably like the Kisa stuff,
the beach,
and then, the beach stuff. So it's gonna be a really
now that
long
you mentioned
summer.
it, it's like so if you say so, it's like Lake House, which is May. It's probably early spring, and then Kisa shows up. That's all volume 5, and then the beach culminates in volume 10. So it's like 5 volumes of summer.
Yeah.
It's the endless summer of Aruba. I was also like, I relate. It's summer now. It's like the middle of July. It's so hot. I wish I was in a pool.
Yeah, I was reading that. I was like, I want to go swimming.
Okay. Oh, it's late. Okay. I'm going to go edit this. Okay. Thank you all for listening to the minor spoilers that we had, which are basically spoilers mostly for next time, and then I guess like Kyoko stuff in the future.
Spoilers for like a couple hours, I guess.
Yeah, spoilers for a couple of hours, yes. I was like, what are you talking about? It's for next week. I was like, oh wait, it's today. Okay, thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Or bye-bye.